Hi everyone, my name is Adi and welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a very special video. As you might have heard, this past weekend I was the winner of the 249 player Reddit VGC tournament. It was an incredible experience, an incredible run, so many great games. I wanted to get this video out pretty quickly, but I also did not expect to spend my entire weekend playing Pokemon, and so this is going to be a little more off the cuff than normal. But I and also Series 6 is winding down, right? I guess we do have another month of Series 6, so I figure I should get this out as quickly as possible, so you guys might actually have a chance to use this team and try it out for yourselves. But also that being said, given that Series 6 is also winding down a little bit, I wanted to focus more on the team building process and my own strong opinions about how teams should be built in a format with Dynamax and how those opinions manifested themselves on into this team. I also wanted to talk about the lead up to the tournament and the tournament itself because this is it was an incredible experience and such an important uh, tournament for me, and I wanted to sort of immortalize this narrative in this video. So it started out on Monday, so a week ago, and I saw on Twitter or on Reddit, one of the two, that this last chance qualifier for the Reddit circuit was happening. And I had known this in the back of my mind, but hadn't really thought about it. In fact, I hadn't really thought about Series 6 at all since I finished interviewing Elisa and Fiona for their women's tour first and second place team reports that are also on this channel. And so I didn't really know where to begin. I messaged some of my friends asking, "Hey, like, have you guys seen this? Who do you want to play?" And a couple people responded. One of the people who was more enthusiastic about it was my good friend Rajan Bal. If you haven't heard, he was instrumental in building the Lapras Comfy Gudra team that I used in Players Cup and got sixth place in North America for that. And he's such an incredible team builder. And so I always loved working with him. And he said, yeah, let's build something together. This will be really fun. We got like a week to figure out Series 6, a format that neither of us had ever really played. And so that was really exciting. Um, Also, on the topic of Rajan, he is one of the best team builders in the world. He has his fingerprints on a incredible team in basically every metagame since the like I don't know how long since I started before I started playing, uh, dating back to even like 2018 when he made Alvin's regional winning team, got second place at his own regional, and helped make Emilio's world's second place team, and then also not to mention my Players Cup team. He's had his hands over every single metagame. So I'm glad that he helped build what is now the best Series 6 team, having won the biggest Series 6 tournament. Um, and so Raja messaged me, and we had some conversation over the course of the week, and not very useful conversation. This is pretty much how it went. He didn't. None of us really knew the metagame, and we had some very small we had opinions about it, and I was playing a little more ladder over the course of the week, and he really wasn't. He was really kind of theorying it out and sending ideas at me, and I was telling him, this. I don't know about that, and so this is one of the conversations that we had. And oh, one more thing that I have in my notes I forgot to mention. Rajan rolled up to this call with a Porygon 2 Marowak Primarina team and had decided he had broken the meta, and we had to break it to him that Porygon 2 was banned. So that was that was another a fun little tidbit about our DMs in the week prior to this tournament and how little that we experience we had with Series 6. The other interaction that I had was with Abe Rath, who is another really good friend of mine. Perhaps you mean Seiko. He is a Toronto local, and he, way earlier at the very beginning of Series 6, messaged me with an idea of using Sigilif. And Sigilif is, we both play a lot of Ranbat, so we're both pretty familiar with it, but the Ranbat set is different. This set he sent me has Tinted Lens, which is an ability where if your attack is resisted, it doubles in power, which means that Sigilif's attacks are always neutral at worst, except for like or flying type attacks at least are always neutral. unless it's like attacking into a Togedemaru, right? If it attacks into a Raichu, it doubles in power, and so it's effectively a neutral attack. And what that meant is that his idea was, well, we don't have to waste our move slots clicking bad moves, coverage moves. We can always just click the best max move, which is max airstream. And I thought that was a really, really cool idea and a really interesting way to abuse Sigilif. And it meant that you can spend the other three move slots instead of using bad moves that are kind of worse attacks than max airstream. You can put status moves on it, and Sigilif just has a lot of really good status moves they can click. And so we talked about that a little bit. He built a version of the team that in the very beginning of the meta that was like all right. And both of us kind of just like forgot about it and never really touched it. And then this past week, I needed something to ladder with, something to reacquaint myself with the format. And so I sort of rebuilt the Sigilif team, and um, I sent him this because I had laddered with this and it had found a little bit of success on the ladder, and it was just it was a cool proof of concept that this you can again a lot of what I talked about in the last video in terms of punishing passive play with sleep, and then similarly using aggressive play to click gravity, and then allow Dracozolt to really do things, also put things to sleep. And then if you have the chance, you can max the Sigilif and click max airstream, and this is a whole different team, right? But what one thing that I should note is that so this is what I started building with, and I ended up deciding, okay, Sigilif is the worst Pokemon on this team. I'm going to replace it with something else and make the team better. And so I ended up laddering with a slightly different team that also had a Primarina and I replaced the Sigilif with a Terrakion and was using Salazzle Terrakion and found a lot of success with those, exploiting Salazzle Terrakion as well as Primarina Dracozolt next to Clefairy as two really, really strong damage dealers. Whereas Abe continued with this concept, kind of kept working on this team, and he ended up building this version of the team, which I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share the EV spreads, but this is a version of the team that he used in this tour, and also Brendan Lewis, Mr. B Dog, used in this tour, and Brendan actually cut this tour with this team, and so it's kind of cool that this team that I was also had a little bit of a hand in managed to do so well in this tour as well. I think he ended up getting top 24 or something along that. Um, yeah, and so that was kind of the lead up to the tournament, and I had been using a team of the same Salazzle, Clefairy, Primarina, Dracozolt. There might have been a Ferrothorn on it. It might have been something else, and then Terrakion instead of Sigilif. And I was using that, and essentially what I felt like was Clefairy was really powerful, Terrakion was really good, and putting really powerful Pokemon next to Clefairy was really strong. And so that was kind of where I was at with the format. But the problem that I was having with my version of the team was that I was doing pretty well on the ladder. I think I got all the way up to like top 50 on the showdown ladder, but it was not, didn't feel like a cohesive team. It felt like I had put a bunch of Pokemon that were good and together, and when I saw a team and team preview, I just got to like pick a mode and try to power through them, and if they had a sufficient answer to that mode, I would lose. That wasn't great, and so I definitely thought there was room to improve. And so Friday afternoon comes around, and Rajan and I jump into a call with Raga Malavia, who's or better known as Moody Man, and he's also been featured on this channel for his Players Cup team report. And so both of those guys are just phenomenal team builders, and Raghav had some success earlier in the format, or I guess it's still going in the Rose Tower Scramble, where he's currently in the top cut, and that so going in, we had a little bit of information, and there aren't great usage stats for Series 6. There are the Pokemon Showdown usage stats, which I'll get to in a second. But going into it, I felt like the Scramble had open team sheets. And that was really cool because it meant that I got to see all of the common cores that people were using, and these very good players had locked into the top cut of this important tour and were currently using. And so it was just a really useful resource for me to look at the top teams and top cores and what we might have to answer. And of course, Raghav was one of the players in this top cut. And so it was really useful to have his insight in the team building process. And the other thing that I brought up when we were team building was, if you watched the last video, I was talking about how I could kind of decipher which Pokemon were underrated and which Pokemon were overrated based on the usage stats. And so the September usage stats had just come out. They came out on October 1st, right? And so I looked at the difference between the usage in the 1760 rating, which really only looks at the very, very top of the ladder and what's used in the top of the ladder, versus the overall usage of Pokemon. And I computed the difference between those two percentages and looked at which Pokemon are used way more in the top of the ladder than in the ladder overall. And as I mentioned again in my last video, this is usually just very highly correlated with usage because it turns out that players at the top of the ladder tend to use good Pokemon. And what is interesting is when you find a Pokemon that isn't high usage but has a massive differential, which means it's found a lot of ladder success despite not having a high usage overall. So if you look at these, the one that really stands out is number 5, Terrakion, where it's only at 7% usage, but has a difference in usage that's comparable to something that's, at 24% usage in Primarina. And so it was, all those factors together, both the fact that I had found it that it was really good, that this empirical measure found that it was really good, and also that Raghav had been using a Persian Terrakion team and had found a lot of success with it, meant that I thought that we were all really inclined to build around Terrakion. And so, and Raghav said, I liked Salazzle. I thought it was cool because of role consolidation, because teams kind of need a fire type, and you just need a way to kill like the Ferrothorns, for example. And also having a fire type that can pressure Primarina is really good. And so I liked Salazzle a lot, but Raghav really thought that Persian was the way to go. And so we put a Persian on the team, and the reason that he wanted Persian was because it has Parting Shot, which is really strong as an ability to weaken your opponent's Pokemon. And what he said was he liked using Terrakion with a Swords Dance and a Weakness Policy, which meant that if your opponent left it alone, you could click Swords Dance. But if they didn't leave it alone, you could Dynamax it and you Parting Shot with your Persian, right? And so your opponent's not doing very much damage, but they're attacking with super effective move, and all of a sudden you're getting boosted no matter what, and you're getting boosted to crazy stat values, and you're doing a lot of damage. So the team started out with Persian, Terrakion, and the Terrakion was Weakness Policy and Swords Dance. And a lot of people have actually asked me like how does Swords Dance Terrakion fared, and it turns out that it's been really, really good. And so again, this is my team, my final team for reference, but it has changed a lot. It changed a little bit. And so, as you can see, the Terrakion has changed a little bit at least. And so we started out with the Persian Terrakion, and we also knew that Clefairy was going to be very good because it was further damage reduction, and Clefairy is just a very good Pokemon in general. And again, the further damage, reducing the damage, and also it means that once the Terrakion takes that one hit, procs its Weakness Policy, or gets a Swords Dance off, and this enables it to get a Swords Dance off even more with the redirection, you could just redirect more attacks or just tank the hits a little more easily, and really let Terrakion run through teams. And so this was our 3 Pokemon core of Persian, Terrakion, Clefairy that we wanted to build around, that we thought was very, very capable of breaking a lot of really common teams in the metagame. And we got to this at about an hour into team building, and I remember Rajan kept saying, "Yeah, we're so far ahead of schedule. Like this is way faster than I expected this team building process to go." And he was right. And then we kind of got stalled for a while because we didn't know what to put in the last 3 slots. And so I think that conceptually, there was a couple things that I felt like we needed. So Terrakion, I think, is very, very cool for one more reason, which is that it fits 2 different roles. It can either Dynamax, and if it gets the stat boost, it can Dynamax and poke holes through your opposing team, which is kind of what you want your Dynamax to do. You want it to do a lot of damage, and then allow some cleanup Pokemon to come in and take care of the damaged Pokemon that are in the end game. Or, and the cleanup Pokemon could be something that does damage, like Urshifu is a traditional example, or it can be something that just your opponent can't out, like a Corviknight or a Ferrothorn type Pokemon. And the alternative is you can use Terrakion as that cleanup Pokemon because it is very fast naturally. It does KO a lot of other common endgame Pokemon like Ferrothorn and like Urshifu, and it has Rock Slide for spread damage to take care of other weakened Pokemon. And so what we were looking for, because Terrakion has that sort of role consolidation where it can fill either role, we had 3 slots left, and we wanted a Pokemon that could pair well with Terrakion if Terrakion chose to Dynamax, and it could be a cleanup Pokemon. And we also wanted a different Pokemon that could do a lot of damage and then allow Terrakion to clean up games at the end game with the beat up boost, with the Sword Stance, or just by clicking Rock Slide in close combat. And so we had these two different roles that we knew that we had to fill. The Life Orb was still available. That was another real bonus of this team, is that the Life Orb is the item that you put on your broken Pokemon, especially in Series 6. And so we were kind of going through the list of oppressive offensive forces that we could support, because if there's one thing that I know about Series 6 is that there are so many stupidly good offensive Pokemon that you stick a Life Orb on, you stick it next to Redirection, and they just go in on your opposing team. And so we went through a few of the options that we could use for these oppressive offensive Pokemon that we could support with our Clefairy. And so some of these options were Dracozolt, Porygon Z, Primarina, Diggersby, Lapras, even like Hatterene. Those are all like really strong offensive Pokemon that you can just stick a Life Orb on, put it next to a Clefairy or any sort of redirection, just go in on your opponent, right? But which one did we want on this team specifically? We didn't really come to a conclusion. We had 3 months left. We could put a pretty solid core together, but and particularly like we could put a Fire Water Grass core together, but we didn't know which one to like. We didn't know what to do. We didn't have to opt into a Fire Water Grass core, even though basically every single common team in this metagame is using some sort of Fire Water Grass core. The other thing that we had was Raghav was telling us, hey, like, what's really good on Persian Terrakian teams? It's Gastrodon. Gastrodon is really good on these teams. And we were like, but like we see why, right? Like Terrakion is weak to water, Gastrodon covered that, but a lot of those broken Pokemon that we were talking about are water types. There's just a lot of really good water types in the metagame. Why are we specifically using Gastrodon? And so the other thing he told us was like, hey, the other way that you can really use Gastrodon is you can put Life Dew on Clefairy, and then Life Dew is a water type move, and so Gastrodon Storm Drain, if you click Life Dew next to it, will absorb the Life Dew and not give it any health, but it will gain a special attack boost, and then Clefairy will also get some health back. And we were like, okay, well that's kind of cool. And so eventually we were no longer ahead of schedule. We were kind of going in circles talking about this. It was like maybe like 6 p.m., 7 p.m., might have been later than that, and we decided we needed to make a decision. And so we decided, what's really good? Charizard's a really strong Pokemon. It goes well with the Gastrodon that Raghav has sort of sold us on. And we decided that Gastrodon, one thing that it does really well is that it enables Charizard as a Dynamax target. Because Charizard, of course, is weak to water, and it's weak to rock. And Gastrodon redirects those water type attacks. Charizard's, of course, very, very, very good next to Clefairy in the past, like a JSOX Players Cup team. And we wanted to, and also Gastrodon resists rock, so we could switch it in and out. And then also, of course, Charizard is very happy to take those grass type attacks that Gastrodon doesn't want to take, but that's really true of any fire type. We just, once we got to the point where we wanted Gastrodon, we wanted a Fire Water Grass core, I think. And then finally, the last Pokemon, once we have Charizard and Gastrodon, that's really all the reasoning we have for Charizard. We need to pick something. We needed to have a Life Orb. We needed to be oppressively strong. The last Pokemon that we had was Grass type, just because we needed that Fire Water Grass core, and also we just didn't put any pressure whatsoever on Water types with the existing team. And so, like, Primarina is probably one of the best Pokemon in the format. Rapid Strike Urshifu, there's Azumarill, there's Dracovish, there's all sorts of really good water types in this format. I'm probably forgetting something obvious, but we decided that we needed to put one on, and that one is Ferrothorn, because there are two good grass types in the format, and one of them, it doesn't do any damage, and that one is Amoonguss, and so Ferrothorn was the obvious choice. Obviously, Roserade is kind of picked up now in both in that I had it on that template team that I had, and also Morgar used it to get second place. So that was also probably an option, but we didn't really think about that. Yeah, so we just need something to put pressure on water types. And so we said, what's good? Ferrothorn's good. And so originally, the team looked quite different. Originally, the team didn't have Sunny Day on Persian. We thought Foul Play was important because Persian might need to do damage, and the Charizard probably did enough on its own. And we also had Weakness Policy and Tracking, of course. We had leftovers on the Ferrothorn. We didn't know much about the metagame. And so one of the teams that I took inspiration from, which I don't have pulled up right now, is the Edu team that topped the ladder and did really well on some of the other RVGC tours. And that had leftovers Ferrothorn with Power Whip, Gyro Ball, and Knockoff and Protect. And so we decided we wanted Leech Seed because in theory it could play to some end games and it could uh, kind of abuse the Wildfire damage that Charizard puts out a little better because she's putting a ton of passive chip damage on your opponent that way. But we played like so we had leftovers on it, and we had leftovers Ferrothorn with Leech Seed, and we played like 10 ladder games, and we noticed a few things. We noticed a big weakness to Clefairy, for example. We just didn't have we don't have great ways to hit Clefairy other than like powering through it, especially with a Gyro Ball on Ferrothorn. And then we also noticed a weakness to Amoonguss that was Focus Sash. Like obviously Persian ignores the Amoonguss and Terrakion can just power through it. But if they're Sash, then we don't get to actually power through it, and then they put the Terrakion to sleep, and we are all very sad. And so we were kind of reliant on Charizard to deal with it. And so uh, we decided to just kind of make and also we just like were underwhelmed with Charizard's damage output. It just didn't do very much. Like honestly, we were not sold on this team at all. We were debating and trying to figure out what's going on and like having like very mediocre ladder success, and we didn't even play that many games. And it's like obviously just not a representative sample size of teams, and we didn't really know what to do. We tried, in fact, at one point we just thought about just rebuilding something at 2 a.m. and we're just like, nah, this is too late. We can't do this. All right, we just got to go with it. We got to trust our guts. We got to say that we built a good team, and we'll got to roll with it. And I'm glad we did, right? And so we made a few last minute changes based on this theory of what the team was weak to. So first we said, Clefairy weakness, right? Well, Ferrothorn is a steel type and it can't hit Clefairy because its attack is Gyro Ball. So we wanted to put something on Ferrothorn that would let it hit Clefairy, and that was Heavy Slam. That's the most powerful move it can use to hit Clefairy other than like a Steel Roller, which we can't guarantee terrain being up. And so we put Heavy Slam on the Ferrothorn and made it Assault Vest because we wanted all 4 moves. And Leech Seed was not really doing very much. It was a little too slow, and Knockoff seemed really good because Edu's using it. He's a good team builder, so he's probably pretty good. And so we put Knockoff on there. Also, just Dusclops was a problem. We don't have great ways to power through Dusclops, and so being able to deal with that was another nice thing about having Knockoff. Um, yeah, so we also changed. Obviously, we put Sunny Day on Persian, which just made Charizard an actual scary Pokemon rather than not a scary Pokemon. One of the other things we really debated a lot was Air Slash versus Solar Beam and whether we needed to put Max Flying on Charizard at all. We changed the Terrakion to Lumberry to help deal with the Mungus, and this was just again a value judgment. It could go either way. I do think weakness policy is really strong on Terrakion, but we decided that like very specific scenarios with the Mungus and with the Grimmsnarl, it allows you to make really safe plays because they can't Thunder Wave you. You can just KO them, and they obviously can't touch the Persian because it's Dark type. And so Grimmsnarl is a lot less of a threat, and the Amoonguss is a lot less of a threat going into game one when you don't know what their item is. And then Will-O-Wisp too is I guess the thing that people will do to try to slow down Terrakion. And so you lose the ability to Dynamax in front of Primarina and to take their water move with your Max Rockfall and then proc a weakness policy and start murdering things, but you do get the ability to set up a lot more safely against teams that rely on status moves to neuter the Terrakion mode. And so those were the major changes that we made like at the last minute. I think. One more last change that we made. We changed Blast Burn on Charizard for Heat Wave, and again, this goes back to the talk about rules. Is that now what we've done is I just talked about how Terrakion is a great Pokemon in the early game as a Dynamax target, or in the late game as a cleanup Pokemon. Well, by putting Heat Wave on Charizard, we also made it so that Charizard obviously just does a ton of damage if it Dynamaxes. It's such a strong offensive Pokemon with that Gmax Wildfire, but it also is a good cleanup Pokemon because Heat Wave is great spread damage. And so in the late game, if they set up Sun to like KO the Ferrothorn, which happened a couple times, or if you set up Sun when right before Persian goes down, which also happened a couple times, or even if they don't set up Sun and you just weaken their Pokemon, you can just clean up games with a really really fast Heat Wave. That was one thing that the team was really I really liked about the team. If you watch my last video again, the last video is about how speed control is bad and then how I used the Drifblim in the IC. And so this team has absolutely no speed control. And in fact, that was one of the criticisms that we had in team building from some people who were just looking over it and saying like, yeah, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. They said, you have no speed control. And we said, at least I said, speed control is overrated. And and the reason that speed control is not necessary is because we have redirection and we have the ability with Gastrodon and Ferrothorn to really stall out a lot of teams that want to, like, just Gastrodon and Ferrothorn are so bulky that they can stall out most attackers. And then Clefairy and Persian are damage mitigation. So your opponent is basically putting a Pokemon on the field that doesn't do anything. Talonflame doesn't do anything. Dusclops doesn't do anything. They have the speed control mod that doesn't do anything. And you have the damage mitigation to slow down their one primary attacker. And meanwhile, all of your Pokemon do stuff. Well, to some extent. Gastrodon it doesn't really do anything. But then again, going back to rules. We didn't need speed control as a rule, which we had an extra slot to play with. And we got to put good Pokemon in the slot that speed control would have otherwise been. We had Terrakion and Charizard, both of which filled two roles as Dynamax targets and as game enders. And so you could, and quite often we did, bring Charizard and Terrakion as the two damage dealers on the team with something like Persian and Clefairy to support them. And say one of these is going to Dynamax early game, one of them is going to clean up late game. On the other hand, the Ferrothorn I think is a great game ender because a lot of Pokemon can't deal with it in the end game. Once you take out their fire type, the game is basically over a lot of times, unless they have like an Urshifu or another fighting type, or they have just like a lot of resources to throw at it. It's very capable of 2v1ing Pokemon. Same with Gastrodon. Like Gastrodon was a surprisingly good endgame Pokemon. And in theory, Gastrodon was a mode on its own with Life 2 Clefairy. That came up exactly once in this tournament. But Gastrodon really just was a necessity. And the fact that we had all this rule compression on the team meant that we could afford to use a bad Pokemon that doesn't do anything but except for have this incredible ability, um, and just have it sit there. And also, like, yes, it does end games pretty well. When like with the Wildfire chip specifically, when you get to put Wildfire out there and your opponent is taking so much chip damage every turn, all of a sudden Gastrodon can end games because everything is actually in Earth Power range. But normally it doesn't do very much with Earth Power. Persian is also really good. Like we have two support Pokemon on the team, but Persian kind of plays the role of two different support Pokemon, both in facilitating Charizard and facilitating Terrakion, and that allowed the second support Pokemon on the team to be Clefairy, which doesn't fulfill any specific role, but is another form of damage mitigation and redirection, which are both like very useful to have on teams. And also, like, it enables Gastrodon, because why would you enable a broken Pokemon when you can enable a Gastrodon, right? I really don't like Gastrodon. We just had to run it. We were really just forced to run it on this team. Um, yeah, and so the fact that Terrakion and Charizard and Persian all had such great role compression meant that we could afford to have a lot more slots on the team that didn't fulfill those very specific roles that I think you really need to have in a Dynamax format when you're running an offensive team. You need to have the you need to be able to game plan saying this is the Pokemon I'm going to Dynamax, this is the Pokemon I'm going to clean up with. And in this case, we had two Pokemon that could already do both of those, and so we had a lot more flexibility with those last few slots. Okay, so that is how we built the best Series 6 team in a day. Now I want to talk a little bit more about the tournament run itself. Um, and so, of course, I ended up going 6-2 in Swiss. And Rajan also entered the tournament, of course, and he also went 6-2 in Swiss, and so we both ended up getting top cut. So here I am, 22nd. Rajan is down here, 29. So we both did pretty well in top cut. And sorry, in Swiss. And so I'm just gonna go through my games real quick. So round one, and I have my notes in front of me now. So round one, I got a bye, which was really cool. My opponent just didn't show up. That was we take those. Only got to win 5 games. That's great. Round two, I played someone called Ruby Rose, and they had a team of Porygon Z, Primarina, Clefairy, Gothitelle, Ferrothorn, and Marowak, Marowak Alola. And I game one, I honestly okay. So here's the thing: I played 16 games of 16 sets of Pokemon over the last 2 days, and this is a couple days. Today's Tuesday, so 2 days later. And so all these sets kind of blend together. So I'm going to talk about what I can actually remember, and I promise I can't remember everything. And so round one, I got a bye. Round two, I played someone in Ruby Rose, and they had this team, and game one, I lost on a Power Whip miss, is what I remember. And Ferrothorn just missed the Primarina, and I couldn't do enough. And then game two, I was outpositioned and I needed Terrakion to get double protect so that it wouldn't die to Primarina. And it got the double protect, and then the Ferrothorn next to it missed another power up onto the Primarina. And so I just wasn't allowed to KO Primarina that game. Primarina really had that. You know what? Honestly, the Primarina didn't have a Life Orb, so I never got to see the item, and it honestly might have been Bright Powder because I just kept missing those power wipes when I needed to hit them. Obviously, I did get the double protect to get in that spot in the first place. So that's that's how the game goes. That was my first loss, and after 2 rounds, I was 1-1 with my one being a bye, and Rajan had lost round 1 before winning round 2, and so we had already lost faith in this team. We were not totally sold on it going into the tournament, and both of us had lost the first game we had to play, and we were not feeling too hot. And then you know what? But it's essentially like a triple elimination tournament because you have to lose 2 games to get knocked out. You have to go to X2 in Swiss. So in this case, 6-2 in Swiss to make it top cut. So you keep playing, right? And so round 3, I played Pkfly was his username, and he had a team of Arcanine, Primarina, Ferrothorn, Hydreigon, Braviary, and Dusclops. And the 2 things I wrote down that were notable in my notes is that Braviary was Choice Scarf, which I think is pretty standard nowadays, and so obviously click Tailwind, and that the Primarina was slower than my Persian in Tailwind, which meant that it did not have, I think, 90 speed is what it needs to outspeed Persian in Tailwind, and that lack of speed investment, I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense because they had a Dusclops on the team too. The lack of speed investment meant that I could parting shot them before they got to move and stop them from doing damage, and also switch into Gastrodon really easily, or I could parting shot the partner, switch into Gastrodon or whatever. And they just didn't really have a matchup once I figured that out. Like game 1, I was a little scared because they could have potentially really punished me, but I also didn't know the Braviary was Scarf because I hadn't really played this format. And they didn't get to punish me because I got my party shot off first and got to Gastrodon, and it was I think I remember it being a pretty easy 2-0 win after I found out that they couldn't actually pressure me in Tailwind. So that was that. Round 4, I played Yuree, and so he streamed this match. Of course, if you don't know who Yuree is, he is an international champion, incredible player, one of the 10 best players in the world, like quite easily, and this match meant a lot to me personally because back in must have been March when the circuit canceled and everything, and people started hosting a lot of awesome online tournaments, including Rose Tower, the second Rose Tower Open. I didn't play in the first one. The second Rose Tower Open, which is like the first big online tournament that happened, and I played and I was on a real hot streak, and I beat like Rio Passer, I beat Lucamere, 2 very good players, was really feeling myself, and then was X2 going to the last round, played Yuree, and he was using a Lapras Alchemy team, and I lost in 3 very, very close games, and I was absolutely devastated. I mean, he outplayed me, but like it was I felt like I really deserved to get top cut in that tournament because I thought I played really well throughout the tournament. And then I went on to never lose to another Lapras team for the entirety of Series 3 and 4 because I figured out the matchup. Like he obviously played excellently, but just that one match with him was enough for me to figure out how to play that matchup, and that includes winning the Rose Tower Challenge back in April or May, where I played like 6 Lapras teams on my route to winning that tournament. And so this like Yuree's a great player, but also like I still remember that game, and so and I still honestly like I remember the end game and how I could have won that. It keeps coming back to like it's one of those memories that you keep coming back to, and how you could have won. And so I really wanted to win here. And so of course he streamed this. You can watch this on his channel. I assume that he has the VODs up, and his team was again Lapras Alchemy. So I really wanted to beat that. Lapras Alchemy, Talonflame, Urshifu, Amoonguss, Duraludon, and this time around I had a much easier time because he had very little to deal with Persian Terrakion. So he led Talonflame Lapras into my Persian Terrakion. I got to click Fake Out Rockfall, and of course Rockfall means the Terrakions takes a little under half, I think, from Max Geyser. And then I got to click Beat Up because my 2 Pokemon were the 2 fastest things on the field, and just start KOing things. He did misplay a little bit in game 1 by resonancing my Persian rather than KOing my Terrakion, which is the Pokemon putting pressure on the field, with a second Max Geyser. But so it goes. Like he I could have clicked party shot, I guess. So like he had to play around that. Game two, he I believe led the same thing, and I decided that he was switching out Talonflame because he wasn't gonna let me do the exact same thing. And no, wait a second. He might have let him move us. I forget exactly what happened, but I remember that he did not put anything on the field that stopped me from clicking beat up and max rockfall, and I believe I KO'd his Lapras turn one of that game, and the game was over. Like the game was just functionally over, and so it was a very quick game, 2-0, and like yeah, it feels good. That was the first of four regional or national champions that I played over the course of this tournament, and so and this is kind of a recurring theme for how my matchups went with them. So stay tuned for that. Round five, I played someone who's Alchemist, and it's Alchemist but with a one instead of an I, and I believe they were also streaming their tour, so you might be able to find the VODs for this game on their Twitch as well. And they had a team of Scizor, Gardevoir, Rotom Wash, Terrakion, Talonflame, and Duraludon. And this team, you might notice, does not have a grass type. It looks like their way of dealing with water types is Rotom Wash. And it turns out that that is not a good way of dealing with Gastrodon. And so this was the game where I got to abuse Gastrodon and click Life Dew with Clefairy and max ground with Gastrodon. And once I got max grounds off and boosted my special defense, like obviously Scizor can't deal with it. It doesn't have damage dealing moves. Talonflame is just a weak Pokemon. So he really just like his only way to damage the Gastrodon was Terrakion, and Terrakion obviously does not want to be sitting in front of a Gastrodon for very long. So that was a pretty quick 2-0 as well, where I just got to do Gastrodon Clefairy things into his entire team. Round six, I played against Michael or Gibby, and so they led. They had a Bisharp, Gengar, Scarf, Butterfree, Primarina, Arcanine, Ferrothorn team, and I don't remember much about this game. I think I went for like Charizard stuff game one, and then game two. I remember thinking, man, this Butterfree has to be Scarf, and but not playing around the Scarf because I thought that he like also might Rage Powder or something. Also, just didn't click Fake Out into it because I didn't respect it. I clicked Sunny Day and got really hard punished by the Scarf Butterfree by just they put my Charizard to sleep and I got a 3-turn sleep and I just lost the game because I didn't have my Dynamax. Um, so yeah, that didn't go well. And then game three, I just did Terrakion Persian things because Terrakion has a Lumberry, and it turns out that Lumberry Terrakion is also really good into Scarf Butterfree because he can't he can't redirect my Persian, and he can't sleep powder my Terrakion, and so like, what is he really going to do with that? He basically had a dead Pokemon on the field into my like oppressive lead. So that was game three. Went really well. He did have a Primarina. That was the scary part. That was, I think, why I did. I don't remember actually. I just don't remember much about the game at all. Like I have in my notes that he Dynamaxed the Primarina game one, which is kind of a given. Yeah, like that was that. That was a 2-1, and then round seven, I played the second of four regional international champions. I played JoeUX9, who is also. I don't think he streamed the Swiss run of the tournament. He did stream Top Cut. At that point, I was 5-1, which meant that I needed to win one more game to make it into Top Cut guaranteed, and I had two chances to do it. And Joe is obviously a fantastic player. Like I think, as he will tell you on his stream, he is the number one ranked player in North America right now. When the circuit got canceled, and so he had a team of Grimmsnarl, Arcanine, Hydreigon, Corviknight, Gigalith, and Amoonguss. And this is kind of par for the course. He likes to run very defensive teams that really rely on damage mitigation and defensive switches. And that's really hard to do in Series 6, but he evidently found a very successful way to do it. And it looked like it was, you abuse the fact that Corviknight and Gigalith can take attacks really well. Grimmsnarl can set up screens, and Amoonguss can redirect attacks. So you obviously have Intimidate. Hydreigon being the one like real damage dealer on the team. Although Gigalith did have a weakness policy, so I guess it could do damage when you set up Trick Room. However, the problem was, he didn't have Trick Room. Never mind. So he couldn't even do that. The problem was that he had very few ways to deal with Terrakion, and if he just like this thing about passive teams, Terrakion Persian is so good into them because you just get to out damage them. Like they're built to take like Porygon Z max strikes and Diggersby max strikes and maybe even like Charizard max wildfires. They're not ready to take +6 Terrakion attacks, and so I got to click beat up and rockball the thing that wasn't Corviknight for 3 turns in a row, and then the end game that I actually won was I got +6 close combat into his +3 non-Dynamaxed Corviknight, did 99%, and then KO'd him with beat up from Persian after he KO'd my Terrakion, so that was cool. Um, and then game 2 I did the same thing. So just like with Yuree, he didn't like very very good player, but lost on team preview because he didn't have a matchup to Persian Terrakion, which just goes to show you how powerful that lead really was. Round 8, so I clinched my spot in top cut, but it was still important to win this round because if you win, you get a bye in the next day of top cut because there were 34 players who made it as X2s or better in the tournament from the last chance qualifiers, but there were also 10 players who were automatically qualified through the previous part of the circuit and doing well in those tournaments that happened prior. And so those 10 were guaranteed buys along with the top how many ever top few players from the last year's qualifier. So if you went X1, you were guaranteed a buy. X2s, 6-2s, I think maybe 1 or 2 people who were at 6-2 got a buy, but I did not have the resistance having lost round 2. So I played Hektik, Preston, I forget his last name, but he's a player who really broke out in 2019 and then hasn't had the chance to shine in 2020 because we haven't had tournaments. But he's been killing it in the online circuit as well. So always good to play him. And he had he had the exact opposite. He had a very hyper offensive team: Porygon Z, Clefairy, Urshifu, Corviknight, Dracovish, Talonflame. This I'm pretty sure is like a rental code, or it's just a very standard build of this team because Raghav had prepped me for this matchup the previous night. We like play tested this because I really didn't want to lose to Porygon Z. So I had an idea of how I'm going to play this matchup, and that was lead Terrakion, Clefairy, click Swords Dance with Terrakion, and protect with Clefairy. And if he targets down and tries to max strike the Clefairy, I'm at +2, and then I can max rock falling, switch out the Clefairy. I really want to preserve the Clefairy so that I can redirect Urshifu attacks. And if he targets down the Terrakion, it becomes a little trickier because I can't Dynamax the Terrakion, it's too low health, but I can Dynamax a Charizard that's still in the back. And I can click Rock Slide with the Terrakion, so the +2 Terrakion puts his Clefairy in max Airstream range, so that suddenly I can like suddenly put pressure on him while also having a faster Pokemon, even though he can click Max Strike. So that was the game plan into this. He did lead Porygon Z Clefairy. He did Max Strike the Terrakion as he was supposed to while I clicked Swords Dance to protect. And so the next turn I just clicked. I did that game plan, and he just made the right plays every turn. And like it's just a negative game state if I make the wrong play at any given time. And he made the right play. The other thing is that anyway, he just made the right plays. So he called the turn 1 correctly and then didn't throw, essentially. And so game 2, the something else happened. I did the exact same thing and he did the exact same thing, and this time he did throw because after max striking the Clefairy, I brought in the Charizard, I maxed the Charizard, and I clicked max Airstream into the Clefairy, KOing the Clefairy, clicked close combat, tried to target down the Porygon Z, but of course I had already taken 2 max strikes at that point. From tracking it already reduced speed twice. And so it would go after the Porygon Z. A Porygon Z targeted on the Charizard rather than the Terrakion. And that meant that the Charizard was... that meant that the Charizard could live the attack because it had Dynamaxed. And suddenly I was in a great position. And so he had an Urshifu and Talonflame in the back versus my Terrakion, which is still alive and at +2. And also my Charizard, which is still at normal speed. And 1 more Pokemon in the back, and he just did not have the damage output to 3v2 because Talonflame doesn't do damage. In game 3, I did the same again. I did the same thing. This time I said, you know what, he's max strike the Terrakion every single game. He's going to do it again. And I'm not going to protect the Clefairy. Instead, I'm going to click Life Dew. And with Life Dew, what I could do is I could get my Terrakion up to enough health that I could actually Dynamax it and max Rockfall into his Clefairy, KOing it, and not fearing a max strike from the Porygon Z because I would actually live it still. And so I did that, and all went according to plan. I was like, oh man, this is great. I got to protect my Clefairy the next turn, and so I still had a near full health Clefairy. And he brought in the Urshifu. He didn't bring in the Talonflame like I expected him to. And I thought, oh great, this is it. I just win the game. Urshifu has to attack into the Clefairy, and then Porygon Z has to attack into the Clefairy because Urshifu can't KO Clefairy, and I get a KO, and I still have my Terrakion, and the game is over, right? And it turns out I was wrong. Turns out he was adamant Urshifu, which meant that his Porygon Z moved first, KO'd the Clefairy, but the Urshifu was still faster than my Terrakion and got to close combat it and KO it, and I lost both my Pokemon, and the game was functionally over. So that was cool. That was a cool change in the team that I expected from Preston, and he just made the right plays almost every turn and won the game because of it. But I actually really like that change because I think that interaction might come up more often than just in my matchup. So he of course also top cut, got a bye, and I don't know how he finished up, but he did pretty well. And yeah, I think he at least got top 16. I think I saw his name pretty far in the tournament. That was the Swiss stages of the tournament. So top cut was a different thing altogether. Top cut happened the next day, and it was open team sheet, which meant that we had access to everyone's teams and their pastes without the EV spreads going into the tournament, much like the scramble was, which was really, really useful. It meant that I didn't have to spend all night scouting for my opponent's teams. It also meant that even later in the tournament, I would have access to whatever my opponent was using. And so I found out my first round opponent and also my second round opponent's teams. And then I think about this was I didn't get a bye, of course, so I did have to play a top 64 match. There were 44 players, and one more thing, it was double elimination, and we were not told this before the tournament started. And so it turns out that normally it would be done by 3 o'clock or something, but now I ended up playing until 8 because I got to finals. So I got to find out my opponent's teams, which is really convenient. And huge shout outs to Mike D'Angelo for helping me sit and prep for the next few hours after I found out my opponent's teams. Really, just we grinded out the matchup. The round one matchup we played over and over again until I felt really, really comfortable and figured out exactly how to play it. My first instinct was it's a really bad matchup because he had a Durant, and Rajan's round one loss was to a Durant. And he basically said, yeah, we have a Durant matchup. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, I believe it. It didn't look like we had a Durant matchup. It was scary to see a Durant on my opponent's team, but it turns out that it wasn't actually that bad a matchup, and I figured out how to play it. And then I also played a few games with Mike for my round two matchup, and that matchup was a lot worse, and I didn't think I had a chance of advancing past that. And I'll talk about how I did advance past that in a little bit. So in the top 64, I played Luigi, whose team is right here. And so one thing to note is that on his original team sheet, he had written that the Weezing was Levitate. And this actually did come up because he, and so my game plan, I guess, was he's probably going to lead Gothitelle Durant. And it's notable that he does not have Rock Slide on Durant, which means that he can't actually OHKO my Charizard next to Clefairy. He also doesn't have Helping Hand on Gothitelle, so he really he couldn't power through the Charizard. And that was important because I could lead Clefairy Charizard and just KO the Durant if I Dynamax. And so my game plan was I want to click Helping Hand and max Wildfire into the Durant slot. And if he switches into Gigalith, it's taking 45%, and then it's taking Wildfire Chip, and it's at really low health, which means that even if it Dynamax, it's in range for Ferrothorn. And Ferrothorn is, of course, slower than Gigalith, so even if he tries to set it up in Trick Room, it isn't going to be in a very good spot. He doesn't really have great options to deal with Ferrothorn, nor does he have great options to deal with Gastrodon. And so by setting up Wildfire, in testing, it was just so clear that Wildfire was such a good attack into this team because he wanted to delay his Dynamax and because Wildfire just did so much chip damage. And so with that in mind, I clicked the buttons, and game one I lost because two things happened. First off, he switched into Dusclops, which is a very good play rather than switching into Gigalith. And Dusclops did not immediately die, and he got to click Trick Room with Gothitelle, and then Gravity Hypnosis, and he got a 3-turn sleep on Charizard and a 2-turn sleep on Clefairy. And however, what really mattered was that in the end game, I just completely misread the end game situation and made a play that I didn't need to make. I clicked Recover with my full health Gastrodon, thinking he would target it with his max Durant, and he just didn't because he didn't have a reason to. And if I had not done that, I think I would have won the Durant v Gastrodon 1v1 endgame. But alas, he did not click that. And so I lost game one. And then game two, he led something different. and I got to, and I don't remember exactly how game 2 went, but what I do remember is that I did a helping hand wildfire play, and at the end of the day, his Dusclops took 4 turns of wildfire chip and 4 turns of sand, and t- got knocked out without me attacking it once. It was crazy. I KO'd a Dusclops without doing a single point of damage to it. It was nuts. So yeah, Wildfire is broken, and the reason Wildfire is broken is because he wants to Dynamax. So the game plan that he went for, by and large, was set up Trick Room early game, try to abuse Gigalith with Iron Defense and Rock Slides, and proc the Weakness Policy and do damage with that. And then Durant can Dynamax at the very end of the game and take KOs with whatever's left, because he needed to be able to power through the last few, the Gastrodon and the Ferrothorn, and whichever ones hadn't taken too much damage, and the only way to do that was Dynamaxing the Durant. And so what that means is that Wildfire does 1/6 damage at the end of each turn to both Pokemon on my opponent's side of the field for 4 turns. So it does 1/6 damage for 4 turns to 2 Pokemon each turn, which means it is doing 8/6 of a health bar at best if my opponent doesn't Dynamax. That means it is taking 1 1/3 KOs every game if my opponent doesn't Dynamax, and that honestly basically came into play. Like he basically, by Dynamaxing my Charizard and clicking Wildfire, I basically took a KO without considering the damage that Wildfire did on the attack. It's just a stupidly insane move, and that's part of why Colossal was so good at doing passive damage in Series 5, and part of why like GMAX Venusaur was so good, and Charizard is still just incredibly good. So no surprise there. That's how that matchup went. Game 3, I did the same things. He did the same things, except he brought Weezing instead of Gothitelle, and he didn't reveal it until the very end. And it turns out that he was neutralizing gas and not levitate, and so that actually made a big difference because I had like prepped the matchup right, and so it does make a difference to how I play. But also like he switched it into like a Clefairy Ferrothorn in front of his Gigalith, and in Trick Room still had Wildfire going, and his Gigalith would go down to my Ferrothorn, but his Weezing, or he could protect the Gigalith and try to attack with Fire Blast into Ferrothorn. And without Friend Guard, I was not sure if I was going to live, but with Friend Guard, I was sure I was going to live. And so I ended up just going for the Helping Hand Gyro Ball and doing like 90% to Weezing through, or how much ever I needed through a Berry, and putting it very, very close to death, which Wildfire took it out, but he Fire Blasted the Ferrothorn. He did not KO it, despite the fact that I had lost my Friend Guard. And so I got to take the last KO at Ferrothorn anyway in the end game. But I also at that point had felt very strong because I had guaranteed won the game because my opponent had put the wrong ability on his team sheet, and I could just call the judge for that. So I did end up telling him after the game, and he got it corrected apparently on the team sheets, which is good because it didn't hurt him for later rounds in the losers bracket. So then that was the top 64. Top 32, I played Chu VGC, also who goes by Luna, and they used a team of Charizard, Diggersby, Rotom, Wash, Urshifu, Clefairy, and Ferrothorn. And this team I did not think I had a chance to beat because I did not think I had a way to beat Diggersby plus Clefairy. I could not figure out how to beat it in the relatively short time I had to prep for it because we had taken so long to prep for the previous matchup. And it also has Rock Slide, which is a real pain in the butt for Charizard. And so I honestly I don't remember much about this game. Do I have notes for this game? I do. Yeah, so he just led Diggersby game 1. Diggersby Clefairy. He gets a max strike by Clefairy. I think what I did was I led Terrakion, Clefairy, and click Swords Dance, and protect, and he max striked it. And it's just not a good spot. Did I protect? I don't even remember if I protect. I don't remember. Okay, I don't remember what happened in this game. But what I do remember is that I had my Terrakion next to my Charizard, and I stalled out the last turn of his Dynamax, and so his Diggersby was faster than my Charizard because it does a Choice Scarf now. My Charizard had taken some damage, and so I might have clicked Max Airstream or something. And so I looked at it, and I'm like, my only way of winning this game is if he misses a Rock Slide, and he misses it on my Charizard right now. And I said, you know what? I'm not even going to try anything else. I'm not double protecting. I'm not doing nothing. I am playing for this Rock Slide miss. He is missing this Rock Slide, and he missed the Rock Slide, and that was all I needed. Because then all of a sudden my Charizard just went off. It did so much damage. Terrakion did so much damage, and I cleaned up the game quite easily. And then game 2, I think they were tilted because they just didn't lead Diggersby Clefairy. They just like honestly would have won the game if they had done that for 3 straight games, and they didn't. They led Diggersby Rotom. I adjusted. I think I led Ferrothorn this game. I thought that Ferrothorn might be able to pressure the Clefairy a little bit more. I tried to figure out something, and so it Ferrothorn into Diggersby Rotom was really good. He ended up committing to Dynamaxing the Rotom rather than again like Dynamaxing the Diggersby, which they would have absolutely won the game if they did that. And instead, they Dynamaxed the Rotom and I Gastrodon in the back, which meant that they just did no damage with or they just couldn't get the KO on Gastrodon. I actually Dynamaxed the Gastrodon that game and took it from there. So that was the first game that I needed a little bit of luck to win, and I got kind of bailed out by the fact that my opponent brought the wrong Mons in game two and got a little tilted after I got very lucky game one. So then the top 16 match in winners top 16. So it wasn't actually top 16, but winners top 16. I got to play Edu, and so this is if you're keeping track at home. This is regional/international champion number 3, and so Edu had a team that he's also using in the top cut of the Scramble, which is Primarina, Dusclops, Ferrothorn, Arcanine, Rotom, Fan, and Diggersby. And this was also streamed on his channel, so I'm pretty sure you can watch it. This was one of the coolest sets, the most fun sets I had, and also one of the most stressful sets I had. And again, this is streamed on his channel, so you can watch it there. But what I do remember of this set is that okay, so my notes going into the game because I did have a little bit of so I got done with my game against Chu pretty early, and so I had like like a 10-15 minute period to look over my two opponents' team sheets, and also because Edu was streaming, I got to watch his stream of the previous game and kind of see who was winning, gauge who was winning, and figure out where I was going to go from there. And so I was looking at their teams and trying to formulate game plans and talking to some friends about what my game plans would be into Edu's team, and the decision was the way I wanted to approach it was I wanted to go with Persian Charizard, Gastrodon Ferrothorn, and we decided that he didn't have a good answer to Sunny Day and then KOing things with Charizard. So that's what I wanted to do. But I also knew that I had to why do one of two ways. If he had a Ferrothorn in the back, then I needed to keep my Charizard alive because his unless we go to like a Ferrothorn endgame, which is just awkward because it comes down to who has more health left. And so it might come down to that. But if he has Ferrothorn in the back, I need to preserve my Charizard, even though I also want to Dynamax it and let it take Solar Power and Life Orb Recoil and whatever chip damage my opponent's giving it. Or the other alternative is KO the Arcanine and then my Ferrothorn can finish the game off. And so those were the two approaches that we had thought up to this game plan. And so game one, I don't remember exactly what happened. You can again watch the stream. It was a great match, absolutely worth watching. But game one, I remember I had to not Dynamax the Charizard right away like I wanted to. He led very well. He led Diggersby and Primarina, which put a lot of pressure on my Charizard. So I wasn't allowed to, and also my Persian. So I wasn't allowed to Dynamax them right away. So we did some switching around for a little bit. He also had a Dusclops and an Arcanine. I believe he set up Trick Room, and then I stalled out the Trick Room, and then I managed to Dynamax after a few turns and suddenly do a lot of damage with Charizard. And because he didn't have the Ferrothorn in the back, I didn't need to preserve the Charizard because I'd seen all of his Pokemon and then won the game that way. Game two, he did bring Ferrothorn, which was the, I think, correct adjustment. He dropped the Primarina, which felt a little strange because Primarina was really good, but I guess he wanted to have the versatility of the other Pokemon. And this was a very close game all the way through, and I thought I positioned it really well. Once again, I Dynamaxed a Charizard early game and then had to save it for the late game. And what ended up happening was it came down to Charizard versus Ferrothorn, and I clicked Heat Wave and I missed, and he KO'd a knockoff, and that was that. And I got so excited because I thought I was just beating Edu, and then of course I had a 90% chance to beat Edu, and I did not. After the game, I was told by John Evans that I was I played the end game wrong, and that I had a 95% chance of winning because I could click Scald with Gastrodon and stuff like that. But at the time I was just like, 90% chance of winning, I will take it, and I went for it, and it didn't work. So game three, we had game three was just an incredible game. It was so much fun. It was oh man, that was such an intense game. Probably the best game of Pokemon I played literally all weekend. And it came down to, once again, he Dynamaxed the Diggersby, and I had set up Sun, and my Charizard, again, Dynamax done some damage, had to switch out, but it had the Wildfire burn going, and on the last turn of Sun, he had Diggersby and Ferrothorn, and I had my Charizard, I think it was like a 27 health or something tiny like that, and because his Diggersby was Dynamaxed and he couldn't protect it, I got to move first. I got to click Heat Wave, KO the Diggersby, and the Ferrothorn, of course, protected, and the Charizard took the Life Orb chip, went down to like 3 HP, and then the Sun ran out, so I didn't have to take the Solar Power recoil. And of course, I thought about that a little bit going into the game, but like, oh man, if that Sun hadn't exactly ended that turn, if I hadn't gotten those turns exactly right, that was game over. And again, once again, it came down to, can I hit the Ferrothorn with a Heat Wave? And this time, thankfully, I did manage to hit the Heat Wave, did manage to win the game that way. I had like 50 seconds left on my clock. It was really intense. I had taken a long time to think. Whew. Yeah. Anyways, great game. Edu also did really well in this tournament, and oh man, always a pleasure to play him. Like that was the most fun I had playing Pokemon the entire weekend. I'm not kidding. So then I had the national champion / regional champion #4, who is Desu, aka Dave Cugnetta, and so of course, if you watch my review of Series 5, I said that he had built the best Series 5 team, got third place in Players Cup, won the Rose Tower Invitational, so absolutely phenomenal player. And he was using a team of Grimmsnarl, Arcanine, Dracozolt, Gastrodon, Amoonguss, and Corviknight. And once again, recurring theme, he is another like top player with a defensive team that had absolutely no answer to Persian Terrakion. Just nothing. Like he couldn't do anything about it. I got to click Beat Up. I got to click Max Rockfall. He did have Turbo Amoonguss with Focus Sash, and of course he got to, but he knew that I had the safety goggles on the Lumberry because of open team sheet, so it never actually came up. But this is like exactly the matchup where I could have gotten punished for not having Lumberry, and instead I just got to take KOs with Terrakion. Both games I think went very quickly. I don't remember much about them, and yeah, that was that. It was just like this. His Corviknight wasn't able to stall out nearly as well as Joe's. He actually maxed the Dracozolt to try to get Max Whirlwinds off, and that just didn't do enough because even though like yeah, like even though he got Intimidate, or I think it was either it was Reflect or Intimidate. Um, Game one it was a Reflect and then a Whirlwind. It didn't matter because I just got to click Beat Up a second time and then do too much. He had to got like a Scary Face off too, but again, I didn't mind being slow because he just couldn't damage it. He didn't have the damage output because this was a relatively defensive team. So that was the game against Desu. It was relatively uneventful, and I think he streamed it too. So there might be VODs on his channel, but again, I just ran over him with the Persian Terrakion mode. He didn't have an answer to it. That was kind of decided on team preview, but we take those. And then in top four, in winners top four, excuse me. So not actually top four, but winners top four. I played someone named Mikey, or SRQ is what their Discord name was, and they had a team of Alchemy, Hydreigon, Duraludon, Talonflame, Primarina, and Urshifu Dark. And so they had uh, an interesting matchup, and so they led Talonflame Duraludon into my Persian Terrakion. I didn't think that I could go Charizard mode here just because they had too much stuff to deal with the Clefairy. And this was something that, again, like I have like a little bit of time in between rounds. And so this time I asked like, hey, what do you think my opponent's going to do? How am I going to approach it? And we correctly deduced that he was going to lead Talonflame Duraludon. And the like right before I entered the game, what I was told was that, okay, if he does that, what you do is you let him KO the Terrakion, but first you click Fake Out Rock Slide, KO the Talonflame, and then you kill him with Charizard. And so that is actually exactly what happened. That was a Rajan game plan. He was like, yeah, if he leads that, just do this. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll buy that. And I did what he told me, and I won the game that easily. So like I positioned my Charizard to do damage, and so he couldn't really deal with that once he didn't have speed control. And then game two, he also led Duraludon Talonflame, and yes, okay. And this game I said, okay, well, just like Yuree did, I don't think he's going to let me KO the Talonflame. I think he realizes that it's important for this matchup. So he's going to switch out the Talonflame, right? He does have things that can switch out into this attack. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to beat up and close combat the Duraludon. And I think he Dynamaxed the Duraludon. No, he didn't, but he didn't Dynamax the Duraludon. But it didn't matter because he switched out the Talonflame and I got this KO on Duraludon, and Duraludon was so important for him. And I just kind of ran over his team that way. So that was like actually a tricky matchup. If I didn't call turn one correctly, both games, I was not in a great spot, but I did, and so I won pretty easily. So yeah, that was how that went. And so then we got to winners finals where I played against Mogar, who is an Australian player. And if you thought like I was talking about how many crazy good players I played in my run, he had to play two former world champions in his top cut. He had to beat both Wolf and Paul Ruiz in his top cut run, which is just insane. He did crazy things this entire tournament. Played really well. And he had a really cool team too: Raichu, Seismitoad, Corviknight, Urshifu, Politoed, Roserade. And so this is winners finals, which meant that the loser would go on to losers finals, and then ideally get a get to win to get the right to play the winner again in the grand finals. And so this team, I looked at it and I said, you know what, AV Ferrothorn runs train. And so I led Clefairy Ferrothorn into his Raichu Seismitoad lead, and I kind of expected him to lead the Seismitoad because that was the punish to Sunny Day Persian. It was a great team preview pressure, but I didn't think I would actually ever get to pull it off. And so I got to just click Ferrothorn buttons that game, and he actually didn't bring his Urshifu, nor did he bring his Corviknight in that game. And so I just ran over him. And so game two, he adjusted very well. And his game plan, he led Raichu Corviknight and managed to position his Corviknight next to his Urshifu, click max Airstream, and I couldn't actually deal with the Urshifu once it got an Airstream up. I played very passively again. I did the similar ideas. And game three, he did the same thing. And again, I just didn't. I knew I had to have my Charizard to deal with Corviknight and to potentially deal with Roserade. I thought that I had to deal with it by stalling it out and hoping it didn't do damage and then dealing with it in the end game. But by giving him the max Airstream boosts, it was enough to let him use the Urshifu and pressure both the Ferrothorn and the Gastrodon that I was using to stall him out. And of course the Clefairy doesn't appreciate taking those max steel spikes either, and so he managed to put a lot of pressure on me and kind of run over me with the Corviknight Urshifu combo very easily. And that was game two and three. That dropped me down to losers bracket, and I had like 3 hours while losers bracket caught up to winners bracket because that's just they have to play more games. And so I took a little breather. Finally, playing Pokemon for several hours straight, and then got to play against Bingji Wang, who is another Toronto local, a fellow U Toronto student or alum, and he is using a Blastoise team with Clefable, Serena, Toxtricity, Urshifu, and Arcanine. And so this is losers finals, and this match was streamed on my YouTube channel. So if you haven't seen it, you are probably not subscribed because it means that it didn't come up on your notification and you just didn't click on it when you really should click on it because it was a cool match. It was actually a really fun match. And if you're not subscribed, you should also subscribe because I gotta shout that out. So anyways, he had a really cool Blastoise team. Clefable was a Pokemon that I was really scared of because I didn't have a great way to deal with it, and because unaware meant that all of my degenerate beat up strats were not useful. My life do strats were not useful. I just couldn't actually power through it. And so he got to lead Clefable Blastoise game one and try to do Clefable Blastoise things, and I believe he pulled it off. Again, you should watch these games. They're on my channel, and there's some really good commentary into them. Game two was, I don't remember everything that happened because I was really in the zone. Didn't actually take great notes. But game two, what I remember is I know his Serena is Sweetbell. It's not Queenly Majesty, which meant that I could fake it out. And because I was on stream and my capture card isn't very good, I do have a little bit of delay input. And so I tried to fake out the Serena, and I would have 100% won the game if I'd gotten the fake out into Serena, but I ran out of time because I saw the play a little too late. And so I didn't get the fake out off. Instead, my Persian clicked Sunny Day, which is at the top of its movesets, which was bad. It was not the right move to click it, but in any situation in that turn. And instead, I almost lost. I thought I had lost, and somehow I managed to pull it out. It was really really intense because I protected my Gastrodon, and the hail chip put it into citrus berry range, and the citrus berry recovery meant that I could live a +2 blizzard from Blastoise and KO it back with Earth Power. So really really intense set. That was game two. That was not the full set. Game three, once again, I thought he had me dead to rights. Game three, I thought I had lost game three, and I will stand by this. I think he threw. I watched the chat replay after the set, and Edu thinks that he made the right play. I disagree. I think that he had the chance to KO my Ferrothorn with Heat Wave in the sun, and if he KO'd the Ferrothorn with Heat Wave in the sun, then my Charizard had a 25% chance to KO his Arcanine with Scorching Sand, max ground, excuse me. And this was actually, first off, he misplayed by, I had my Persian on the field, and it was very clear he was going to KO the Persian with his max Blastoise, and he had clicked max Hailstorm the last two turns, and it was pretty, I think he could have figured out that I didn't have a Gastrodon in the back by nature of never switching it in when I had the opportunity to, and there were plenty of chances to. And this was kind of a misplay on my end, was not bringing the Gastrodon in the first place. Maybe. I guess it kind of worked out. I brought the tracking instead. And so he he clicked max Hydro Snipe, which lost him the game because I got to click Sunny Day, and it didn't overwrite the weather. And Hydro Snipe was never the correct play because either I have a Gastrodon in the back, and he loses if he clicks that and I switch it in, or I have a Charizard in the back and I get the clearance to click Sunny Day and he doesn't get to turn off the weather. And so he clicked Hydro Snipe on the last turn of his G-Max Blastoise, his Dynamax, and it meant that I got to click Sunny Day. My Persian went down to the Hydro Snipe. I got to bring my Charizard in, and Charizard, now all of a sudden, two things happened. I got to just take KOs with Wildfire and all the like. I think I took 4 KOs with Charizard that game. And more importantly, he clicked Burn Up into my Ferrothorn to KO it. I think he could have clicked Heat Wave, but by clicking Burn Up, he became typeless, and that meant that my Wildfire could do more damage to the Arcanine than Max Ground would have done. And I believe Max Ground has a 25% chance to KO most Assault Blast Arcanine, give or take. But that was the back of the envelope calc that I ran, and it's just Wildfire just KO'd him. So then I got to KO the Serena. Also, he took Wildfire Chip because he was not a fire type anymore. So I think that was just a misplay. I think Heatwave would have KO'd and he would have won the game if he'd done that. So that he had a couple chances and he didn't take advantage of them, and so I ended up winning. And that was a really also just a really intense set, really well played on his part. Game one and two especially, it was really fun. And once again, it got back to grand finals against Malcolm, and he was using the same team, of course, couldn't change that. And this time, you would think I had a good game plan, but I did not. And you can watch this. It's on my channel. This was, I will fully admit, this was a very poorly played set on my end. I did not play this well at all. I didn't know what I was going to do, and given that I had 3 hours in between my winners finals and losers finals set, you'd think I would have figured something out by then, but I hadn't. And so I almost timed out of turn one of game one of grand finals, and the last second I clicked Heat Wave with Charizard, and that was absolutely not the right play because that meant that he got to proc his weakness policy, which I don't know why I let him do, but I got bailed out because I burned him. I burned his Corviknight with Heat Wave, and I won the game because Corviknight, with his weakness policy proc, was still burned and just taking too much. And you take those, that happens, and I do feel a little bad, but that's the way it goes. Then game two, I decided I'm leading Clefairy Charizard because he had yet to switch into Politoed onto any of my fire moves in any of the games. He led Charizard game two, game three, and now the first game of Grand Finals, and he never switched into Politoed, so he's just not doing it. And so I went for Helping Hand Max Wildfire into the Corviknight. He maxed the Corviknight and KO'd. And later, after the set, he sent me a calc and he posted it on Twitter showing that it has a 25% chance to KO his Corviknight set. I had looked up a similar calc in between games or during the game, just trying to figure out whether this is a viable game plan. and the like approximate spread that I had used, because I didn't know his exact spread, said that it was like a 60% chance of KOing, and I said, okay, I'm okay with that. That's fine. But he was actually very specially bulky, and so the Wildfire had a 25% chance of KOing, and I got the 25% chance, and basically won the set because he killed his Dynamax before he got a chance to do anything. So I got the bracket reset, and then games 1 and 2 of the grand finals. I don't know. I guess he was maybe tilted, or maybe I just figured out the matchup a little better because he again did the same thing with Raichu Corv, and this time I led. I think I led Clefairy and uh, and Ferrothorn, I think. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to knock off this Corviknight, and I don't think the Corviknight is going to do enough damage to actually pressure me. But also, based on the fact that when Weakness Policy was procced and he was burnt, he didn't KO the Charizard, that probably means that I can just Dynamax the Charizard and take under 50% health from his max Airstream, so I can be a lot more aggressive with my Charizard, knowing that he's Urshifu in the back. So I was just a little more proactive with my Charizard. He got to he got to do his thing, but without because I knocked off the weakness policy, the Corviknight wasn't doing enough damage, and I managed to actually pull that game out pretty cleanly, I think. And then finally, I'd won the last 3 games, and he needed to pull out the next 2, and he led Roserade, trying to mix things up a little bit, and I did totally differently. I think um, I led Persian Charizard. I don't actually remember what I led. Might have been no, it was Ferrothorn, Persian Ferrothorn. Um, I led a lot of different things. I think that time I was just like, you know what I can do? I can just like fake out and KO the Raichu, and then start KOing whatever comes in that slot over and over again. But he led the Roserade, and game one of the first set in winners finals, I saw that Gyro Ball just kills the Roserade. I actually misplayed again that game. I was not supposed to parting shot the Roserade. That was just a really, really bad play in every respect. Because if he had just doubled the Persian slot with Sludge Bomb or with Leaf Storm and Airstream, I just don't have a great switch into that. But instead he protected, and then he tried to Sleep Powder, went to my safety goggles Persian, so he just might have forgot about that in the heat of the moment, and it cost him. I got the KO with Gyro Ball. I got the parting shot out and got to reposition. I got to eventually position my Charizard, and that was the game. Like, yeah, that was grand finals, man. That was it. So I this is the bracket all the way through. I got all the way to grand finals, and I got the bracket reset, and I 2-0'd him both times, and I won the 250 player RVGC circuit finale. It was absolutely wild, incredible experience. So much fun playing, and I really missed it, and it was really, really well run. So shout outs to Aaron and to Jen and to Billa and to everyone else who was involved in organizing the circuit. I had a really, really great time. As per usual, thank you for listening to my hour long rambling, hour 10-minute long rambling about this team. I really appreciate all of you guys having subscribed and supporting me throughout the tournament, and all of my friends, and especially huge shout outs to Raghav and Rajan for helping me build this team and really putting the time in on that Friday to hammer out the best team in Series 6. And shout outs to Mike for helping me prep so much. And everyone who was, watching the stream, supporting me, all my friends for like just like I've just had this huge outpouring of love and support and encouragement, not just since winning, but also just in the last few months, that really encouraged me to keep playing, keep trying to get better, and keep putting this content out for you guys. And so first off, just like I want to say I love you all, but also like I just really appreciate all of the support. It really makes my day every time. So I'm glad I can do it. Yeah, and so the rental code's on the screen. So feel free to try it out. If you're playing in more Series 6 tournaments, I hope you enjoy it. Of course, there is a paste in the description down below, as per usual. And yeah, thanks for watching. Until next time.